Ask me a question, and I'm a very honest person.
Yeah.
Allow me to answer you. Firstly, Australia is not a Muslim country, and its government is not an Islamic government. Muftis belong in Islamic governments. Saudi Arabia and its mufti, Syria and its mufti, Lebanon and its mufti. Governments that have a large Muslim population that, for example, represent 50, 60, 70% of the nation, of the army, them having a mufti is reasonable. Mecca's next door, Medina's next door, no problem. The Shia Muslims, the Grand Ayatollahs, the hierarchies, they're living within their own sacred sites. In Australia, we don't have the need for a mufti to begin with. Any religious figure that's Muslim, there's no need for it. But
watch what unfolds when Australian politician Pauline Hanson sits down face to face with a Muslim Imam who, going in, seemed like exactly the opponent this segment needed. The first question doesn't waste time. Does the Grand Mufti genuinely speak for Australian Muslims, or was he just handed a title nobody actually voted for? The Imam's response isn't the defensive shuffle you'd expect. Australia, he points out, isn't an Islamic state, so borrowing a title designed for countries where Islam runs the government is a bit like appointing a grand rabbi to lead a nation that's barely 2% Jewish. Structurally speaking, that's a solid point, whatever you think of the person making it. But hang on, because he's really just getting started.
they're cardinals, and the Jewish community has their rabbinical organizations. The Muslims also need people to manage their affairs. And I say, yes, we need a head federation, a figure. But this person needs to be suitable for the position. In my opinion, none of the muftis have been suitable. The first one came out and said, women are like cat meat, Tajuddin al-Hilali. The second one who passed away, Fahmi Naji, came out on the first day in office, said, I'm not sure if Osama bin Laden is responsible for 9/11. That is his first statement, and he passed away. And the third one is this current mufti that's been here for 5-6 years. What title, what position, have you ever heard of a position, the Grand Mufti of Australia and New Zealand? We're in Australia. What does New Zealand have to do with your job?
Every past Grand Mufti of Australia gets called out by name. One compared women to cat meat. Another's first public remarks questioned whether Osama bin Laden even had anything to do with 9/11, which is a bold opening statement by any standard. This isn't an imam defending his faith's leadership. This is an imam auditing it like a disappointed shareholder. And just when you think he's finished with the laundry list, wait for what comes next.
This whole idea of let's take control over the affairs of all Muslims. Firstly, not all Muslims are Sunni. And not all Sunni Muslims follow him. We have the Ahmadiyya Muslims who are peaceful. We have many Muslims that don't take their fatwas from him. I think the title in itself is misleading. The Mufti of Australia is misleading. He doesn't speak for all Muslims. He speaks for his own community. And I will say something. Our Prime Minister and the opposition, so Bill Shorten and Malcolm Turnbull, it really hurts when I see them visiting a man. You can see the pictures, smiling at him, rubbing against him. This is the same man, the Grand Mufti, when he was in Abu Dhabi, wrote an article or a book, and it's translated. The Kaiser Trad translated it for him. And in the book he says the West brings us nothing but diseases. And he went to Palestine in the Gaza Strip and he met with the authorities there and he said, I'm proud to be on the land of jihad learning from its sons. This is on the record. I'm not... Yeah. It's all proven.
So you can understand why when we hear these remarks, that's why I get very upset, and a lot of other Australians get upset. But here we have the Prime Minister, putting on a function with the marquee and had them in the marquee, and it's like, I get upset about this, and so do other Australians. And, what is the answer to this? How do we find a balance? Now, I can understand, I've met Muslims here who are supportive of me, and they've said, Pauline, you are right in what you're doing. you know, because they want peace. They want to live in this country in peace. They've left their own countries to come here for peace.
Footage shows an Australian Prime Minister, an opposition leader, smiling right alongside this same mufti, despite writings where he reportedly labelled the West a source of diseases and took pride standing on the land of jihad. That's a heavy accusation, and if it holds up, it's easy to see why it would sit uneasily with people. Hanson barely has to say anything here. The Imam's practically building her argument for her.
Out here that are radicals, and we don't want it. I don't want them here. What do we do to stop the radicals coming into this country?
That's a question for the immigration department, and the answer is very simple. Strengthen your borders. Don't make it as easy as it is now to come in for anyone. But I believe that the only way we could solve the problem is that if the authorities and the Prime Minister understand who they are dealing with. The Grand Mufti isn't what they think he is. Many people think when I speak like this, I want to be the Mufti. I want a female Mufti.
Oh.
Yes, I've said publicly last year, I want a female to be a Mufti for a change. The whole National Imams Council, there's not one female on the list in the website.
But isn't it under the Quran? It's basically about suppression of women. Women are only worth half the value.
Border security comes up next, and here's the twist worth watching for. The Imam isn't opposed to vetting radicals. His point is that the solution belongs in immigration policy, not blanket suspicion cast over an entire religion. He even raises the idea of wanting a female mufti, a genuinely forward-thinking stance that doesn't fit neatly into either side's expected script.
And their
According
attitude,
to their interpretation, yes.
Yes. So a woman means absolutely nothing to them. I want to put this to you. What was your opinion when I walked into the chamber in the Senate wearing a full burka?
They should be happy. It's the dress code of the wife of the Prophet. They should be very happy, and they shouldn't be offended. Why are they offended? You were dressed very modestly according to them, no?
I was.
No, then why are they
very
offended?
much so.
Then why the outrage? You did something really good.
Well, thank you. A lot of
No,
Australians,
that's not my opinion, but you know
a
what
lot
I'm
of Australians
saying.
will agree with you. But George Brandis, Senator Brandis, the Attorney General at the time, said I mocked the religion, that I actually mocked them because it is a religious dress. Is it a religious dress code?
It is a religious dress code to a very hardline minority of people. It is a religious dress code to a hardline minority, not mainstream Muslims. It's a fundamentalist thing. So if you take a look at the wives of the Saudi Arabian kings, are they dressed in burqas? No. You look at Walid bin Talal and his wife.
So what you're saying to me then, those women that wear the full burqa are more or less the fundamentalist.
So
then we do have a concern in this country, and especially now in our court system, the full burqa, they don't want to show their face, they won't stand up for the judge.
That's a problem. If a police officer says, show me your face because I want to match your ID card, and then you say no, then that's a problem.
Yeah.
That's a problem that affects national security and so on. Do you know why it's a problem? Because the solution for this problem is in itself a problem. So if we come and we say, you're a woman who is wearing a burqa, you've come to the airport and we need to identify if this passport belongs to you. Or you're driving a car and we need to identify if this license belongs to you. Or a bank or anywhere. And you will not show...
Just when the conversation seems to have found its rhythm, it takes a genuinely surprising turn. Hanson's infamous full burqa moment in the Senate gets brought up, with the expectation the Imam will condemn it. Instead, he tells her she should have been praised rather than criticized, since she was dressed exactly as modestly as strict interpretations require. The look on Hanson's face is basically what bracing for a punch and getting a compliment instead looks like.
To a man, or in any environment where a man can see you. The solution is, and this is the Muslim mentality, the solution is, we'll have a special booth for us, just like Dubai Airport does, where we can go in. Well, that means we need one in Coles and everywhere you go, in Centrelink, and everywhere where you need to go. You're going to have to If you're exchanging something, you're going to need a booth where a woman is there just for the lady to show
I
her
don't
face.
believe that we should have a booth in Coles or Woolies or the universities. I
That's
think they can go back to a Muslim country and they can dress and act that way in another Muslim country, not here in Australia.
That's why I said the solution in itself is a problem.
Yes.
To have booths everywhere is a problem.
I'll tell you another big problem that we have in Australia is the multiple wives that Muslim men have. So they have 1, 2, and I think it's up to 3 wives.
4.
4 wives. My
permanent.
God, that's worse.
There's something about how Pauline handles opponents that you might not fully grasp yet. Not until you see this next part.
Pauline, that legal immigration is proportionally higher than across most of the free world, including the United Kingdom. Why have the establishment opened the borders to such an extent?
I think it's to prop up the GDP, gross domestic product in the country. So they've overspent beyond their means. You know, the credit card just comes out all the time, putting it on the credit card. We can't afford it as a nation. And we're paying about $50 billion a year, about $50,000 every minute on in interest alone. So we can't cope with that anymore as a nation.
No.
And
mass immigration, Pauline, that's cooking the books, isn't it? Because it creates temporary economic growth, but not per head, not per Australian, not per Brits.
No, we go backwards in Australians. So, you know, years ago you could buy a house with about 3 times your wage. Now it's 14, 15 times your wage to actually buy a house in Australia. So the median house price is $1 million plus. And that's how expensive it is. And young Australians can't afford it. To find $100,000 just as a deposit, it's out of their realm. They can't afford it. And the foreign investors in this country is out of control, which I want to stop foreign investment in Australia, not only of our housing, but also of our land, prime agriculture.
Hanson's argument here is refreshingly direct for a career politician. Mass migration, she claims, isn't compassion dressed up as policy. It's GDP life support for a government that's spent its way into a corner. Housing costs get pulled into it too. Foreign investment pricing young Australians out of a market that used to actually be within reach. Whatever your politics, young people can't afford a home anymore, is one of those complaints that cuts across every political divide there is. And if you think that's the sharpest line of the segment, just wait.
Why is common sense so absent from the Australian political establishment?
Hey, it's not Australia. I think this is a worldwide problem, don't you think?
Yeah.
It's happened in Britain. You've got so many problems over there. And all I got to say to people out here, I don't want Australia to become like Britain. I think we're only a matter of years behind Britain and what's happened over there. And that's my argument. I don't want Australia to become like Britain. Look, my grandparents came from Britain. I love England. I love traveling over there. And I think it's a beautiful country. But I just don't want Australia to become the way that Britain has.
Well, I think it's damning, Pauline, that you've said that you are worried that Australia will become like the United Kingdom. And how would you characterise the perception of Britain from Australia? What do you think is going so wrong?
Britain gets held up as the warning sign here. Hanson genuinely believes Australia is retracing the same steps, stride for stride. There's an old warning about nations repeating history they refuse to learn from, and whatever you think of her broader politics, that's clearly the fear she's drawing on.
I think you've lost your national identity. I think there's no pride in flying the British flag. I think that people don't know who they are anymore. The amount of migrants you've let into the country, there's no pride for them ever to assimilate or become British. I have concern about Sharia law. You've got over 2,000 Sharia law, or mosques in the country. I think, that is a problem. We have it in some of the suburbs in Sydney, Sharia law. And it's not compatible with our culture and our way of life. And you can't just go along and blindly ignore it, because it undermines your culture, who you are as a nation. And I think I welcome people from around the world, migration, but we need to cut back till we can provide the housing and the infrastructure for the people here in Australia. I don't want to see people living in their cars. I don't want to see families living there. I don't see the pensioners that aren't looked after to provide them the decent healthcare they should be getting. And what about our veterans? Number of veterans that are living on our streets or suiciding is appalling. You know, my responsibility as a Member of Parliament is to the people of Australia first and foremost. And then when you can manage that, fine, have more migrants if it does support our resources that we have. But I'll tell you now, Mark, we were supposed to have 26.4 million people by 2050. Do you know we've already reached 28 million, 24 years ahead of that time?
It's shocking, it's unsustainable, it's unprecedented historically. There's no hope of integration or indeed of economic success to come from those levels of immigration, Pauline. Are we now in a situation, given the fact that you're a very significant political figure in Australia, that in fact you feel sorry for Britain, that you pity what's happened to Britain?
I really do. I feel for the people over there that they've lost hope in themselves. Look, all those migrants, I see the refugees that were put in the hotels and accommodations, the people who are on the streets, they're protesting over it. I see the crime that's happening on the streets, and the rights of those migrants are above the rights of the British citizens. I saw one councillor there in an interview said, I was born and bred. As soon as she said it, she put a hand over her mouth. Oh my God, I shouldn't have said that. What the hell is happening over there? That just upsets me so much. And that's why I'm determined that will not come here. And I will keep standing up for Australia, the values here. So if you want to come here, you give your loyalty to this country.
Sharia law is incompatible with Western legal systems, she says. Full stop, nothing up for negotiation. Notice how she pairs that with an Australians First message. Housing, healthcare, and veteran support handled before migration numbers climb any further. Standard populist sequencing, sure, but it carries real weight against a housing crisis nobody in government seems eager to actually fix. Stick around though, because the final stretch shifts from policy into something closer to fear on the ground.
The Hamas in their own country, you know, who we bringing into the country, I think we have to be mindful of who we bring in.
Most definitely, and it's obviously particularly raw at the moment, Pauline, following the awful Bondi Beach attack at the tail end of last year, which was absolutely devastating for the people of Australia, a truly horrific incident. What are your thoughts about the threat of radical Islam in Australia? Because it's something that we're grappling with here.
I think it's we shouldn't take our finger off the pulse for that and don't disregard it, because I think we should know what's going on. I personally, after what's happened at Bondi, we've had other terrorist attacks previous to this, but Bondi was a big awakening to a lot of Australians, and we have to ensure that who we bring into the country are going to be part of this nation. Don't bring your hatred here, don't bring your ideology or your beliefs to this country that is incompatible with the Australian way of life. Like I said, I don't agree with Sharia law. I don't think it is compatible with our laws in Australia. And therefore I will continue to speak out.
Vetting migrants from conflict regions for ideological alignment also gets raised, a genuinely contentious position, and one she shows no sign of backing away from, whatever pushback follows. After all that, a couple of things worth sitting with. When the toughest criticism of a community's leadership comes from inside that community rather than from its usual political critics, does that make the criticism more credible? Or does it just mean we've been asking the wrong people all along? And if a politician best known for stoking division can sit across from someone she's supposedly at odds with and find more common ground than either expected, what does that say about how much of this debate is really about disagreement versus who gets heard first?